Hi Gary, and welcome to the Sweat Cave, even though we're in your glorious offices here near Cannock, the beautiful Cannock Chase. So we've got a question from Wayne Alvin, and Wayne's asking about what is he supposed to eat before, during and after competition.
Okay, no problems at all. Now, in one sense, that's a massive question in itself, and really I'd want to talk about basic nutrition first, and then we'd go into race nutrition, and you probably don't want to sit and listen to me drivel on for the next 2 hours. So I'll try and answer Wayne's question as briefly and as quickly as I can. First of all, Wayne, it depends on how long you're riding for. So, if we're talking about the context of this in Zwift racing, most of the races I'm looking at around about an hour. I know there are some which are considerably shorter, and you can do some events that are longer, but we'll talk about an event that's typically an hour. Before any race, before any training session, realistically, I would look that you want your last solid food intake to be about 2 to 3 hours before you race. And then after that, I'd probably stick to hydration only. I'd sip water, so I've gone into it nicely hydrated. And that can just be plain water. It can be water with a nutrition tab in it. So we've got some salts and some electrolytes in to make sure you're properly hydrated, particularly if you're racing indoors. Now, one of the problems we've got is the higher exercise intensity goes, actually getting carbohydrate down into the system when you're racing really hard is potentially quite difficult. But there's also some suggestions that a bit of carbohydrate in keeps the blood sugar levels high and keeps you mentally alert. So, it's another one during the race. Try, practice, see what works for you and see what doesn't work for you. But I'd probably suggest after around about 20 to 30 minutes, you hit a gel and maybe hit another one after about a further 15 to 20 minutes. So in a race of an hour long, you might be hitting your first gel at sort of 20 to 30 minutes and then another one at around about 45 minutes. And that will give you a bit of a sugar spike, a bit of a glucose spike to get you through that event. I'd probably say you want to try and hydrate a little bit alongside of that as well. But again, if you're really working hard, your gastric emptying shuts down, and you can, despite what I'm going to tell you in other sessions, you can actually be dehydrated up to a certain portion. It's going to impair your performance, but you're not going to be able to drink adequately well. So, it's really being hydrated before you start, not worrying quite so much during. Get a little bit of fluid on board, but get the carbohydrate on board during. For me, the critical thing is actually what happens once you finish that race, and it's having your recovery drink. So you're finishing your warm down, so you don't just finish the race, turn off your Zwift and fall off into the sofa. It's actually sitting on the bike for a further 5, 10, 15 minutes, clearing the legs out, bringing the power down. Once you've done that, and once, during that, again, you're hydrating well, you're getting some carbohydrate in, it would then be having a recovery drink immediately afterwards. And that recovery drink would probably have at least 60 to 80 grams, maybe even 100 grams of carbs. Again, Wayne, unfortunately, I don't know how big you are. And you'd probably have something from 15 to 25 grams of protein in there, and you'd want to rehydrate, so you're actually replenishing a lot of the sweat loss that you've lost. So simple terms are no solid food in probably the last 2 to 3 hours before. After that, hydration only. During the race, carbs are really important. Hydration is, but if you're working really hard and there's steam coming out your ears, if it's an hour race, we can get away with it. If it's longer than that, you need to hydrate. Make sure you cool so that you're not overheating, and then look at the recovery drink as the critical portion.
And for those of us that are really tight,
Yep.
Is there anything you can take on board instead of a gel that will be absorbed as quick in your body?
No, not, solid food takes time to digest, it takes time to break down. So, you'd avoid the solid food. If you're really tight, you could do a bit of bread and jam, but do you really want to be trying to eat something as you're blowing steam out of your ears? If I'm sat at threshold with repeat bursts above threshold, trying to get something solid in at that intensity is really hard. In a longer road race situation where you've got periods of downtime, you couldn't get solid foods in. But if it's an hour of smashing it, solids aren't even a question. So it's then, okay, we go back to the hydration, and what could you put into that drink? Well, what's considered, or what used to be considered one of the favourite drinks in the pro peloton was your Coca-Cola. Now you could have your flat Coke, you could have your orange juice with a bit of water watered down, and your Coke watered down with a little bit of added extra salt in there if you really wanted to. I'd go with something that's tried and tested. You know, how important is your racing to you? Is it just a hard session, or is it an out and out race? And again, this comes back to people, in my mind, potentially over racing that much. If it's a race that's important to you, then you're going to do everything right. If it's I'm racing every night because the race is there, you know, it's important that we look at regular hydration, regular food, regular nutrition, as opposed to getting optimal for racing. And if we're looking at optimal for racing, you find something that's worked, and you know what, £2 on a couple of gels isn't going to break the bank.
And what are your thoughts about people trying something new on race day?
If it's an important race, you don't try anything new on race day. You go with the tried and tested. However, and again, one of the beauties of doing things like Zwift racing is for some people it's all important, but for most of us it's about getting us ready for in real life racing, for racing out on the roads with other competitors, you know, a cut and trust. And really you can then use that Zwift racing to look and see what works best for you. And it might be, you know, what solid food you had earlier in the day, what your hydration strategy was in the hours up to the event. But again, what you've got to remember is you're in an indoor situation, and your sweat rates potentially can be quite different to what the external situation is. So where you might need to go into an indoor race slightly overhydrated, that may not be quite so the case outdoors. And if you try and replicate that outdoors, you might get, you know, an hour and a half into your race and you might be dying for a wee stop as opposed to, you know, hydrating optimally. So things change both indoors and outdoors.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Garry.
No problems. Thanks for inviting me along.